Wealthy people at all levels are leaving the UK as they never have before because this new UK government is going to tax you as they never have before. This isn't Tony Blair's New Labour. This is a move in the wrong direction. And I'm going to tell you later what my very own tax team is saying about the backdoor way the UK is going to tax you even without raising all of your taxes. Today, I'm going to walk you through just a number of the new taxes that the UK wants to impose on you and your options to get out. So here's the thing. Nomad Capitalist, we help 7, 8, 9-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally reduce their taxes. We also help people create Plan B. We also help people get set up in new countries that actually respect their contributions and have the kind of culture that they want. And here's what I've always told you. Better years too early than a day too late. Some of these taxes they're talking about in the UK, they may not get through. Now, they're pretty hell-bent on doing this, Labour is, and they have the ability to do it. But even if some particular proposal doesn't make it through, you'll understand that that's still what the political class wants. They'll get around to it eventually, whether it's next year, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. But if you're there as their taxpayer when some big tax comes, you may not be able to leave fast enough. And we've seen that, particularly with Americans who want to give up U.S. citizenship, but we see it all around the world. You want to be a tax resident somewhere else, and that means exiting the UK tax system before some of the crazy stuff comes down the pike. So don't leave it until it's too late. You want to be somewhere else, and if it takes 3 years before the new taxes kick in, you know what you'll find? Same thing I have. Hey, life in Malaysia is not so bad. Life in Dubai is not so bad. Life here in Panama City is not so bad. There's so many tax-friendly places. I'll come back to that in a moment. But even Warren Buffett, who has supported higher taxes on American investors, says taxes are going up around the world. In the UK, here are some of the headlines. Wealth tax looms amid pressure from Labour's union paymasters. Wealth taxes have been largely relegated to the bin in Europe. Countries realized not enough money, too hard to implement, too confusing, out they go. But there's one thing you realize about these very left-wing tax-the-rich politicians. You realize they think they're smarter. They think they're better. They think yeah, Hugo Chavez in Venezuela, he didn't know how to do socialism right. We know how to do it. I almost imagine it's like all of Leonardo DiCaprio's ex-girlfriends, I'll be the one to get him. No, you won't, baby. And so, wealth tax coming back to the UK, let's see. That one may take a while longer. But I thought that Europe had pretty much, with a few exceptions, moved on from that. Perhaps not. And what I can tell you also about these politicians, they don't even care about the revenue. And some of them occasionally actually say that. They care about making you miserable. They care about getting even with you. They deeply hate successful people. Oh, but don't you know the successful people own the politicians? No. That's the elite class. I'm talking to the average person. I'm talking to me. I'm talking to you. I don't know any senators. I don't know. Okay, Nigel Farage, who is now in Parliament, spoke at Nomad Capitalist live. I don't know any senators. I don't know anybody in Parliament. Okay, Nigel Farage is in Parliament. He did speak at Nomad Capitalist live. It's our annual 4-day event. We bring some of the greatest minds from global citizenship together. You learn a ton of stuff from our R&D vault. You got about 800 people from around the world mixing and mingling, and there's a lot of entertainment. NomadCapitalist.com/live. We sold out in 14 days last year. You'll want to get on the waiting list. But Nigel Farage comes. He talks about how he was unbanked. And then Nigel Farage goes, and every time we meet, we're very friendly. I'm not calling Nigel asking for favors. I don't think Nigel would do me any favors. Other than Nigel Farage, he's the only guy I think I've ever met. Maybe when I was a kid or something, I met some guy running for Congress. My dad was on the radio. I don't have any influence, and I'm guessing neither do you. So for those of us who are in that position but have high incomes, we're the ones the politicians hate. And here's an example of this from London's Telegraph. Headline: Families rush to give away fortunes amid inheritance tax raid fears. Now listen, I've never been a big fan of trust fund kids. I value hard work. I like people who work. And so the vast majority of our clients, they built what they have. Or it's their children who are continuing to build what they have. We don't have a lot of layabout clients that we serve here. And so what the Telegraph says is that a lot of wealthy people are ringing up and asking about giving away their wealth until this 22-pound hole, which, by the way, you didn't create the hole. The government created the hole. They spent money on stuff that they wanted to buy off their voters and their constituencies and the people that support them. And now they're like, hey, why do we have this hole, you jerk? And they want to impose this double death tax, where the value of cash gifts is now rising as more families have found themselves exposed to this 40% charge that Labor's bringing in. The maximum someone can pass on to their family without paying inheritance tax is capped at just £325,000. That's pretty darn low. Or £1 million if you own your own home. Those allowances have been frozen. So even under the quote-unquote good politicians, you're still paying a boatload of taxes, which is why I think it's just generally better to leave. But now they're talking about, inheritance tax could rise. And so that's why the lump sum gifts are being brought in. But also, what about capital gains? And so that's the double death tax. So that's one of the headlines. So wealth tax, double death tax. I'm just trolling through. I'm just collecting these at this point. I get the newsletters every day. Here's another. Double death tax could be higher than 50%. Bereaved families risk being hit with capital gains bills on top of the inheritance tax rate. So the first article was the inheritance tax rate is getting worse. Inflation was pretty bad during the big inflationary period post-pandemic in the UK. It had one of the worst inflation rates, and yet the allowances, tax-free allowances, did not go up. The article says if a death was considered a chargeable event for capital gains tax purposes, someone with a rental property that had gained, for example, £100,000 in value by the time of their death would trigger a 24% liability. The remaining liability would be at 40%, and that could bring the total to 54.4%. So you worked your entire life, you made money, you paid tax on that. Then you invested it. You did buy-to-let, you did rental property, you put it into shares, you did whatever. It accumulated over time. The government thinks because you invested in their country, you owe them. But whatever it is now, it's not enough because they created a 22 billion pound hole. So now, inheritance tax, wealth tax, double death tax, what else is from? These are all from the London Telegraph. Fresh war on landlords. I've been telling you for years not to be buying property in a lot of these Western countries. It's a lot of rules. It's a lot of regulations. Let me tell you, as someone who has owned property in the United States, the happiest day of my bloody life selling a couple of those properties that I was letting out. And when I saw this statement, it was one garbage fee after the next. So many things were deducted from that sale price. When I sell a property in most of the places in the world, and I rarely do, but if you do, almost nothing's deducted. You sell it for $100,000, here's your $100,000. Maybe there's like a notary fee or something, but it's so much more difficult to buy property in the U.S., the U.K., but it's not difficult enough for labor, who, as the Telegraph says, plots fresh war on landlords. Ministers are considering a hardship test that can complicate eviction of tenants. It's already one of the more difficult places in the world to evict tenants. Now, I get it. Other places in Europe are also hard. But what do we tell you here? Stop looking in your own backyard for places to go. Now, if you want to move from the UK to tax-friendly Ireland as a non-dom, or Malta as a non-dom, or Cyprus as a non-dom, those places all speak English, of course, or if you want to move to Spain under the Beckham law, or if you want to move to Switzerland under the lump sum, fine. If you want to stay there close to home, same time zone, fine. Nomad Capitalist, we help our clients choose from more options than any other company. I'm not here to shoehorn you into Dubai or shoehorn you into one place or the other. We have all the options. We've got, I think, 7 people now in research and development. All we do is stay on top of all the options so that you can go anywhere or more than one place. But understand, if you're going to try and compare your country, it's not that bad. They're doing the same thing in Germany. Right. I'm not telling you to go to Germany. I'm telling you to go somewhere different. And there are countries where, yes, it's easier to invest. They tax you a lot less. It's actually landlord-friendly. They respect capital. They know you've worked hard. There are hell, even Ireland has a budget surplus now, even before Apple's $14 billion payment, right? They did that even in a European country. There's other countries around the world that actually manage their affairs properly, and they don't have to come and point the finger in your face. But here's what's happening in the UK. Labour is plotting a fresh crackdown on landlords, stricter rules on evictions, requirements for costly eco-refurbishment. Ministers are considering bringing in French-style hardship tests because they all go to these like OECD conventions and all these like all the high-tax countries get together and they're like swapping, ways to like, hey, here's how we're screwing over our people. Oh, that's great. Like we got a thing else, and they exchange all the ideas. Do you know who's not doing that? Laugh if you want. African countries have mostly opted out of that. Global minimum tax, a lot of this stuff. They're like, we don't want any part of that. I'm not saying move to Africa, although, hey, living in a villa in Mauritius, in a neutral country, relatively low taxes, nice weather, nice people. Could be worse places to go. Work towards a passport, potentially, to where you don't have to rely on Keir Starmer to renew your passport. Or even Boris Johnson, who said maybe they won't if the government doesn't like you. And so the countries that are getting together, figuring out how to screw their citizens, that's not all of them. But ministers are considering bringing in French-style hardship tests that would have to be carried out before landlords could evict tenants, effectively banning evictions in cases where renters were found to be worse off. Now, is it your fault they're worse off? Listen, let's not take pleasure in people having tough times. But is it your fault? Here's what happened. The UK was riding high for many years. They hit a bump in the road back in the 70s. Then Thatcher came in and all throughout the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s. Okay, things got a little back on track. Geopolitically robust country. Where are you going to go? This is the only place on earth. We got you. We got you by the short and curlies. You can't go anywhere. And what happened is countries like Malaysia, where we host Nomad Capitalist Live, that 4-day event, they got a lot better, became a lot more livable, became a lot more open. People realized, this is an alternative. And people like me who hire around the world said, okay, maybe some of these folks here in the UK, they either don't have the skills I need, or there's an entitlement mentality, or you know what, I just can't afford to hire people for these prices. And they hire overseas. And so now everyone around the world's getting an equal shake, at least more so than they did before. And the UK is like, hey, what happened to our monopoly? And they can't take care of their own people as well anymore. They let inflation come in. All this stuff. And at the same time, they've been a name brand to countries like Qatar, for example, who want to invest there and drive up prices for geopolitical benefit. Not because they think it's a great investment. Maybe it's a stable investment, as long as you don't piss off the UK government. But they wanted geopolitical influence, so they bought stuff up there. And the government doesn't know how to handle that. So now people are having a tough time, and the Telegraph says there's a fresh war on landlords to come. Here's what I know. We could go through headline after headline after headline. Double death tax, inheritance tax, new capital gains tax. They want to raise the rates. They're not, increasing the bands to where inflation, you're paying more tax on this, basically less income. Now listen, we could keep reading the headlines all day long. Here's the bottom line. It's getting worse and worse, and if you're successful, you know it's getting worse and worse. Labor has pledged not to increase the big three taxes, corporate income tax, and VAT. But here's what they are doing, and here's what was sent to me from our very own internal tax guy and our R&D team. We should expect more anti-avoidance mechanisms coming from administrative rulings and regulations as opposed to actual changes to the tax code. I've told you for years, some of this stuff, whatever it may be, they'll do through the back door. I told you a little over a year ago, Australia is starting to open that back door to even taxing their own citizens wherever they may live in the world if they don't do it the way Australia likes. You didn't leave the right way. And it's different than the way it always was. Now it's more based on, you're an Australian citizen? Yeah, we get to tell you what to do. That's the back door. And what our team is telling me is they're looking for more back door. They're looking for more, hey, we're not going to change the law. We didn't change the law. But we're going to make administrative rulings. We're going to put in more mechanisms to where, you can't, you want to lower your taxes that way? You can't do that. Labor has committed to increasing registration and reporting requirements, strengthening HMRC powers, investing in new technology, and building capacity within the tax authority. Let me be very clear. You have options. If you choose to stay in the UK, you should pay your taxes. You should file the forms. You should follow the law. I believe in following the law. I'm the goody two-shoes of the offshore world. But you do have options. And so if you want to live in a place where you don't get threatened with being stabbed to death but for wearing a Rolex, they're pretty much everywhere else on earth you can go to. And many of those places have lower taxes. What we do at Nomad Capitalist is match people up with what are your wants, needs, desires, family, weather preferences, dozens of criteria. Where should you go? How do you make your money? Is it a business? Is it capital gains? Is it crypto? Is it royalties? Different tax systems that benefit each of those. Go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply. We'll be happy to help you. We help 7, 8, 9-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally reduce their taxes. And if you're not ready to legally reduce your taxes, if you want to stick around and see what they're going to do next, we can at least help you set up a residence permit or get a second passport to where you get a way out. I think that British citizens at this point should have a second passport to protect themselves from whatever might happen. Maybe they decide to roll out some kind of more aggressive tax system that follows you. You want to live in the UK, you're going to pay high taxes. Just accept that. And I think you should do it. But there are options. The mechanisms that you might have used in the past to reduce tax are going to be taken away as well. So it's not just Dubai. That's one option. There's well over a dozen options in Europe. There's close to that many in Central and South America, including some places that are very livable. A handful of things in Asia, some very livable places. Kuala Lumpur, where we host Nomad Capitalist Live, but all over the world. Even, again, Mauritius in Africa or the Middle East. There are so many places to live. I think that we've recommended close to 36 different countries for our clients to move to, all of which were tax-friendly in some way. And I think that there's I don't know that I've seen so many headlines, such a flurry of headlines about more taxes from one country where the tone from the government is imperious as hell. It's one thing some of these politicians have a smile on their face and we're going to help people out and sorry, you got to pay more. These people are taking great pleasure in it. They hate you. They hate you. They will, with great pleasure, take your money. There won't be a thank you. They'll plug their hole and they'll act like they did it all themselves. They created the hole and they fixed it by stealing from you. These taxes aren't going to win anytime soon. Even if the Tories were to get back into power, it's not like the taxes are going to go down, but taxes are going to go up and there will be more of them. If you want our help, nomadcapitalist.com/apply. You'll have better weather, better food, probably more social opportunities, probably be safer in a lot of these tax-friendly countries. Well, we pay taxes, but at least we're safe and our country is civilized. Really? Gulf countries, some of the safest in the world. Asian countries, some of the safest in the world. Lower taxes, many of them. You're paying and you're getting nothing in return. It's not going to get any better.